My name is John Miller, and I'm 38 years old. My wife Sarah and I live in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, along with our 2 kids, Emma, who's 9, and Ryan, 6. We've been married for 12 years now, and life had settled into a pretty comfortable, if imperfect, routine. I work as a sales manager at a manufacturing plant about 30 minutes from home. Nothing too glamorous, but the pay and benefits allow us to get by reasonably well, especially with Sarah's paycheck from her new marketing director role. Truthfully, her new job has caused some tensions lately with the longer hours and increased stress, but I tried to be supportive, thinking it was just a temporary rough patch. This particular Thursday night felt pretty standard at first. Sarah had texted earlier to say she was going to be late at the office again, finishing up some big client pitch. I exhaled in frustration, but decided to keep my mouth shut. We'd been fighting about her schedule enough lately. The kids and I had Kraft macaroni and hot dogs for dinner, followed by a family game night in the living room that devolved into Ryan crying when he lost Candyland, as usual. Just a typical weeknight of parental duties and idle boredom as I waited for Sarah. Around 9 p.m., I got the kids tucked into bed and decided to veg out watching some reruns of The Office in our bedroom. That's when I heard the familiar ping of Sarah's phone going off with a new text message. Out of sheer habit, I glanced over at it sitting on the nightstand, expecting just another work message. But what I saw there knocked the wind out of me. It was a message from some guy named David, less than 3, talking about how he missed her gorgeous face and couldn't wait for them to meet up later to pick up where they left off last night. My heart felt like it stopped in my chest. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with more messages from this David freak, each one flirtier and raunchier than the last. I felt nauseous just reading the words, my mind spinning as I scrambled to go through her earlier messages. It was undeniable at that point. My wife of 12 years had been carrying on an affair right under my nose. Sarah got home a couple hours later, but I could barely even look at her. No greeting, no "how was your day?" Nothing. I just glared at her stone-faced and said, "We need to talk. I know all about you and David and your little fling." She went pale instantly and her eyes welled up with tears. John, I am so sorry." It was a moment of weakness that just spiraled out of control. "You have to believe me. It'll never happen, Aga." "Save it," I snapped, feeling the anger and betrayal coursing through me. "Our marriage is over. I want you out of this house first thing tomorrow morning. Don't bother packing anything more than an overnight bag." Sarah absolutely lost it then, collapsing on the floor in heaving sobs. But I was just too disgusted and heartbroken to deal with her crocodile tears in that moment. How could the woman I loved, the mother of my children, do something so cruel and unforgivable? I spent the night tossing and turning, barely able to sleep through the maelstrom of dark thoughts swirling in my mind. Was this somehow my fault? Were I not as attentive or romantic as I should be? Was she just a selfish cheater at heart? There didn't seem to be any good answers, only sheer agony. The next morning, Sarah tried to plead her case while packing a small suitcase, but I just stonewalled her. "We'll discuss this later after I've cooled off," I muttered, unable to bear seeing her face at that moment. All I could think about was some other man being intimate with my wife, and it made me want to vomit. In the days after kicking Sarah out, I just felt numb and aimless. Interacting with the kids was almost robotic as I grappled with the devastating betrayal. Why did Sarah have to go and rip our family apart like this? Part of me wondered if I was being too rash or letting pride get in the way. Maybe this was just a temporary lapse in judgment that we could overcome with marriage counseling. There was still so much history and so many good memories with Sarah. I'd be devastated losing my lifelong partner. The other part of me, the more vindictive side, just wanted to go utterly scorched earth on Sarah and that slimeball David she cheated with. How could I ever trust her or be intimate with her again without thinking of their tawdry affair? My head was spinning constantly, overthinking every tiny aspect of our marriage, looking for any clues I missed about Sarah's unhappiness. Was I too caught up in work and neglecting her needs? Did the spark just fade over time like it does for so many couples? There had to be some explanation beyond her just being a selfish cheater. I finally worked up the courage to call Sarah about a week after she moved in with her sister. She was an utter wreck, sobbing and pleading for my forgiveness, saying it was just a temporary lapse in judgment that she'd regret for the rest of her life. I made a horrible mistake, Johnny, she cried into the phone, but you have to know I still love you with all my heart. It was just, I got so caught up in my career and felt aimless for a while. David was a charming client who complimented me, and before I knew it, one thing led to another and save it, I said flatly, having no interest in hearing the sordid details of how she hooked up with some dickhead. Have you cut off all contact with him? Blocked his number and everything? Oh, of course, Sarah stammered. It's over. Over for good. He was just a terrible mistake, baby. You're the only man I want to be with. Some part of me wanted so desperately to believe her, to go back in time a few weeks and make this all go away. I told her that I'd be willing to try marriage counseling if she was fully committed to working on things. We began attending intense therapy sessions twice a week, both individually and as a couple. I felt humiliated having to open up about my wife's infidelity, but I choked down my pride in hopes of saving my family. Sarah was going overboard trying to prove her remorse and desperation to keep me. She was bringing home flowers multiple times a week, cooking my favorite meals, being overly attentive with the chores and kids. It was almost like she was a different person. Part of me appreciated her efforts, but if I'm being honest, it also made me uncomfortable and suspicious of her motivations. Like she had some other agenda besides just wanting to repair our broken marriage. I couldn't shake my paranoia even as we slept in the same bed again. The trust, however fragile, was nowhere near rebuilt yet. I went through her phone and email accounts constantly for anything unusual, checked her location sharing at work, even made her check in with me via text at random times to ensure she wasn't lying about her whereabouts. It was exhausting. Our counselor, Dr. Patel, urged me to work on opening my heart again. You need to take a leap of faith and vulnerability, John, she said. If you let your pain and fear control the narrative, then you'll only breed more resentment and resistance to heal. Her words made sense, but God, it was so difficult to let my guard down again. Any small hint that Sarah may be hiding something just sent me spiraling back into a pit of anger and distrust. It was like walking on eggshells around each other, never knowing what could trigger the next emotional fallout. Part of me wondered if the damage was just too deep to ever regain that unconditional trust and intimacy again. If we were just postponing the inevitable collapse of our marriage by dragging this all out. I honestly went back and forth on it every single day based on my fluctuating emotional state. But I kept slogging forward for the sake of my kids and history with Sarah. Divorce wasn't something I ever envisioned for our family. For those brief flashes of normalcy, I could almost convince myself we'd persevere through this nightmare, that I could forgive her and somehow we'd regain that spark. 3 months went by in that fragile state. Some counseling sessions were productive, while others disintegrated into blame and resentment between me and Sarah. It was like our marriage was held together by a brittle thread ready to snap at any moment. I just hoped I was making the right choice to keep fighting, for all our sakes. 3 long months went by with Sarah and I in that fragile state of attempted reconciliation. Some counseling sessions were productive while others descended into mudslinging about her infidelity. I was doing my best to take that leap of faith Dr. Patel encouraged, but the trust was just so hard to rebuild. Certain little things would put me on edge, like Sarah coming home late from work looking flustered, or sheepishly avoiding eye contact when I walked into a room. She insisted it was just workplace stress, but it made my paranoid senses tingle. Was the affair still ongoing despite all her insistences otherwise? I fought every gut instinct to go full psycho-jealous husband and snoop through her things constantly. The thought of finding more secrets and lies made my skin crawl. But Dr. Patel warned that pushing Sarah with accusations could damage our progress. One night, however, something felt distinctly off about Sarah's demeanor. She came in around 9 p.m., not even greeting me or the kids, and beelined straight for the bathroom. "Everything okay?" I asked tepidly when she finally emerged. Sarah startled a bit. "Huh? Oh, yeah, just not feeling great," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. My heart sank. All the old warning signs of her infidelity seemed to be there. I excused myself to the bedroom, trying to control my shaking hands, and made the impulse decision to go through her phone while she showered. Sure enough, when I opened up her messages app, there it was. A long thread of explicit messages between Sarah and that scumbag David, talking about their plans to meet up later for sex, how much they both needed each other, along with some utterly graphic stuff that makes me cringe just thinking about it. White-hot rage overcame me at that moment. This whole fucking time she had been lying to my face, crying crocodile tears about rebuilding our family while sneaking around to get plowed by her side piece. What a selfish, depraved piece of shit. I had to step away and collect myself before I punched a hole in the wall. Cool, rational thoughts were not coming easy in that moment. Sarah emerged looking surprised to see me fuming in the bedroom. "John? Honey, what's wrong?" I could barely get the words out through my clenched jaw and boiling anger. This is what's wrong." I shoved her phone in her face, open to the lengthy message thread with David, watching her face contort in shock and horror. She went pale. "John, I can explain, I swear." "Explain what?" I shouted, startling her. "That you've been banging your side piece this entire time while I bent over backwards trying to rebuild our family. That you've been lying to my face, day after day, making me feel like the biggest idiot on the planet." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she shrank back against the wall. I'd never seen her look so small and afraid. Please just let me explain. It's not what you think, I swear," she sobbed, reaching out to me. I got caught up in a moment of weakness, but I've been working so hard to save it. I roared, feeling that vein of rage pulsating in my neck again. "We're done, Sarah. Done. I want you out of this house by morning, and I'm going to that scuzzy David's home to get the full truth." Sarah just collapsed in a heap on the floor, bawling, but I stormed past her out the door, car keys in hand. I needed to confront that worm David myself and expose this entire sordid situation once and for all. I would not be made a fool anymore, and there would be a reckoning. My vision was basically a tunnel of red-hot rage as I peeled out of the driveway that night. I don't think I've ever been filled with such visceral anger and disgust in my life, not just at Sarah for so brazenly betraying me again, but even more so at that worm David who contaminated our marriage. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have been operating a vehicle in such an emotionally compromised state, but rationality had left me at that point. I had one mission in mind: to locate and confront David face to face so he could no longer deny his home-wrecking behavior. I found David's workplace address online pretty easily, some tech startup in Midtown Atlanta. The 30-minute drive over passed in a blur as I replayed those nauseating texts between him and Sarah over and over in my mind. Would he try to lie or make more feeble excuses? Or would he own up to being a cheating scumbag? Either way, I wanted to look him square in the eyes and observe that smug look it wiped off his face. I wanted to see the fear and panic as he realized I wasn't some chump who could be gaslit anymore. When I arrived in the tech office's parking deck around 10 p.m., I made sure to hit record on my phone's camera before getting out. I figured I may need the evidence, plus putting it on video would force David to stay truthful. No backtracking if it was all on tape. I marched right past the lobby receptionist despite her confused protests. Sir, you can't just go back there." "I don't give a crap," I growled, scanning the office numbers until I located David's area. I could hear him and a couple colleagues leaving a meeting room, chatting about some code or whatever. Without hesitating, I shoved the door open, making David freeze in his tracks. The other two guys looked on in confusion as I got right up in David's face, shoving the phone camera towards him. "You lying, cheating sack of garbage," I yelled, startling everyone. "This is John Miller, the husband of Sarah, who you've been screwing around with for months now behind my back." David's eyes widened with panic as his coworkers started murmuring. I could see sweat already beading on his forehead as the reality set in. Good. I wanted him to squirm. "The what? No man, you got the wrong idea here. Sarah and I are just friends from, work colleagues." David sputtered out, "Never a good liar." "Can it, dirtbag?" I roared, inching my face even closer so the camera caught every expression. "I have text proof of your nasty sexting and crude affair with my wife. So either you fess up to it right now in front of your coworkers, or I plaster this footage all over the internet to make sure the whole world knows what a scuzzy homewrecker you are." David swallowed hard, his face reddening in humiliation as his colleagues slowly put the pieces together. He seemed to realize I wasn't bluffing in that moment. Okay, yes. Sarah and we've been involved in an affair for months now. I'm sorry, I made a terrible mistake and lapse in judgment." "A mistake," I shouted, feeling that vein in my neck start pulsating again. "You knew exactly what you were doing, you selfish prick. Months of planning and scheming behind my back to sleep with another man's wife." I couldn't stop the verbal onslaught at that point, years of anger and emasculation bursting through the seams. David just shrank back, his head hung in shame as I admonished him in front of his peers. I surely looked like a raging lunatic to those other poor guys just trying to get through their workday. When I'd finally exhausted all my pent-up insults and hatred, I turned and stormed out wordlessly. David's coworkers just watched in stunned silence, surely dreading all the office gossip awaiting them. As for David himself, he'd been exposed as the sleazy, untrustworthy dog he was. His credibility and reputation would forever be attached to cheating homewrecker now. The humiliation and consequences were only beginning for him, and I had to admit, capturing that reality finally sinking in and overwhelming him with dread in that moment. That felt so unbelievably cathartic and gratifying after the hell Sarah and he'd put me through. But my work wasn't finished yet by any means. Not if I wanted to unravel this twisted web of lies and betrayal completely, once and for all. After that insanely cathartic but draining confrontation with David at his office, I spent the next few days just lying low, trying to make sense of my swirling emotions. Part of me felt a sense of relief that I'd finally exposed his wastely behavior and lancing that betrayal festering inside me for so long. But there was also an emptiness too, like that scorched earth moment with David had closed one chapter, but set me adrift without any clear path forward. My marriage was undoubtedly over, yet I had no idea what divorce proceedings or custody issues awaited. Just a vast unknown that left me feeling rudderless. One night after getting the kids to bed, I found myself idly scrolling social media when a thought struck me. What about David's wife, Laura? She was the one other person who surely deserved to know the ugly truth, maybe even more than myself. From combing online, it seemed they lived across town and had been married almost as long as me and Sarah. There were happy family photos plastered all over Laura's accounts from just a few months ago, blissfully unaware of her husband's treachery. The thought of that impending devastation awaiting her knotted my stomach. I debated back and forth for a couple of days whether to reach out to Laura or not. Part of me reasoned that David's actions were his burden to bear in revealing everything to his own wife, not mine. And what if I caused some hell to rain down on an innocent person's life by being their messenger of doom? But I also realized there was nobody else to look out for Laura and give her fair warning before rumors started swirling. She was about to have her entire reality shattered just like I did. Shouldn't she get some advance notice from somebody? I ultimately couldn't silence my conscience. I found Laura's number online and anxiously tapped out a tentative text. "Hey Laura, this is John Miller. I don't know if you know me or not, but it's really important that we meet up to talk. It involves our spouses and isn't good news." She responded instantly, "What on earth are you talking about?" Followed by a string of confused question marks. When I didn't reply right away, I realized this required an in-person conversation. We ended up meeting at a coffee shop downtown a few days later. Poor Laura looked understandably frazzled and impatient when she first arrived, clearly dreading whatever bombshell I had to drop. I stumbled around at first, struggling to find the right words to obliterate this woman's faith in her whole life. But when the truth finally came tumbling out, telling her about David's sordid affair, the months of explicit messages, me catching them red-handed, Laura just shattered. No, you must be mistaken," she muttered at first, grabbing the table like she might faint. Tears instantly welled up as the gravity hit her. "David loves me. He couldn't. Oh God." I showed her the screenshots and video footage I had, making it undeniable. All the color just drained from Laura's face as her world imploded right before my eyes. "That F*** king bastard," she erupted after a spell, startling other patrons. "I'll divorce his cheating ass. Cut him off from the kids and everything how could he?" I reached out and grabbed her trembling hand, which made Laura flinch at first before melting into almost hysterical sobbing right there in the coffee shop. We must have looked like a spectacle, but in that moment, an instant bond was forged in our mutually anguished souls over the deceptions of our spouses. For a while, we just sat holding each other, crying out the utter agony and confusion only two wronged partners could understand. I'd never have wished this hell on anyone, but Laura's numbed presence was the first real solace I'd felt since being gutted by Sarah's affair. Once Laura could compose herself a bit, she squeezed my hand hard, eyes steely despite mascara streaks. "Let's take these sons of bitches down, John. They deserve to suffer just like we are. I want everything out in the open, dragged into the light." I couldn't help but nod firmly in agreement. The hurt coursing through me demanded harsh justice. So we started hatching a plan right then and there in the coffee shop, a way to humiliate and make Sarah and David atone for their sins together, in one final cathartic strike. No more secrets, no more discretion for their eroded morals. A few days later, we sprang into action. The plan Laura and I devised to publicly shame Sarah and David was both exhilarating and terrifying to actually pull off. We picked Woodruff Park downtown, the same green space where our families used to have picnics and get-togethers before everything went to hell. The twisted symbolism felt apropos. It was a sunny late morning when Laura and I arrived separately, trying to appear casual despite our heart rates skyrocketing in anticipation. Right on cue, around 11 a.m., Sarah and David came strolling up, completely oblivious to the ambush awaiting them. My eyes narrowed watching them arrive hand in hand, giggling and smiling without a care in the damn world, like they just effortlessly upended multiple lives and families on a whim for their selfish desires. My fists clenched seeing Sarah's face after the endless deceptions and heartbreak she'd put me through. Then Laura gave me the signal, taking a deep breath as we stepped out from behind a copse of trees to cut them off on the path, finally making Sarah and David stop dead in their tracks. They both paled instantly, realizing they'd been caught red-handed in broad daylight. Well, what do we have here?" I remarked coldly, loudly enough to draw some confused looks from nearby park-goers. "If it isn't the two lovebirds who decided to trade in their families for a cheap fling." Sarah's eyes went wide with panic. "John, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, whore." Laura spat at David, making him shrink back. "Out flaunting your mistress in public for all to see." The shocked gasps from those around us indicated the ambush was taking full effect. I glared at Sarah, and that smug look was finally wiped away, replaced by sheer dread. It's not what you think. We were just..." "Save the bullshit lies," I shouted, cutting Sarah off as more heads turned our way. "We all know about the two of you carrying on your disgusting affair for months behind our backs, living some depraved fantasy while destroying everything in your wake." David opened his mouth to respond, but I shut that down too. No, let's shine some light on what exactly has been going on, shall we?" With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and began reading snippets of their most graphic sexts aloud, making sure to project my voice. Sarah's face turned beet red while David started squirming. All around us, complete strangers stopped in stunned silence to gawk at the spectacle. "Oh, you liked that, did you, David?" I seethed. "Can't wait to shove my thick..." Please stop." Sarah whimpered through mortified tears, realizing her tawdry messages were being broadcast publicly. "You don't get to beg after the hell you've put my family through." Laura jumped in, eyes bulging with fury. "Everyone here deserves to know what kind of degenerate pigs you two really are." We took turns roasting them with all the lurid evidence, texts, locations of their depraved hotel meetups, anything to humiliate and shame them for their repeated betrayals. Around us, a full crowd had gathered in stunned silence, watching the sordid drama unfold in real time. I'll never forget the looks on Sarah and David's faces, the red flushed embarrassment, the crumpled expressions of two terrible people finally being consumed by the gravity and consequences of their actions after so much deceit. It was utterly soul-crushing and crippling, and they deserved every lash of karmic justice. At some point, Sarah collapsed into a heap on the ground, weeping and begging incoherently for forgiveness. But Laura and I were merciless, continuing our public dismantling with righteous indignation until every seamy detail and lie had been dragged into the scorching daylight. They had it coming. Their aura of smug untouchability was permanently shattered. Laura then made the motion to wrap things up by fixing David with one last look of unbridled disgust. "Get this through your miserable skull. You'll be getting divorce papers soon, and I'll make it my life's mission to ensure you never see your kids again after this. Same goes for you, Sarah." She grabbed my hand then, squeezing it firmly as we turned and strode away, leaving that disgraced pair to pick up the crumbled remains of their dignity alone amidst all the bewildered onlookers. As much as their takedown was public and bruising, I felt centered, lighter, like a shadow had been lifted after lancing that heinous betrayal. In the aftermath, Sarah moved out completely, and our separation became official. It still gutted me to eventually tell the kids that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore. But there was also a strange sense of relief that our marriage's corpse could be laid to rest, better than rotting further in denial and false hopes of reconciliation. Laura faced her own devastating realities, unsurprisingly filing for divorce from David immediately and locking him out of their finances and home. His social pariah status at work only accelerated once that homewrecker label spread further. I heard through the grapevine that David got fired not long after for creating a hostile environment. As for Laura and myself, we took things extraordinarily slow at first, out of mutual respect for the grieving process and building trust again. But there was an undeniable kinship and comfort in having somebody who could so acutely empathize with the personal devastation wrought by infidelity. Our kids starting spending more and more time together as our hangouts became more regular. So many tears were shed venting those raw emotions and moral injuries. They say time heals all wounds, but we came to acknowledge that those scars would always remain, leaving us profoundly altered as people. Not bitter per se, but wiser, rawer, less naive to the worst humanity can manifest in ourselves and others. Only in recent months have Laura and I begun cautiously exploring a romantic relationship. It hasn't been seamless. Both of us still experience trust issues, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We take things one day at a time for now. But I do feel a sense of optimism returning, a knowledge that no matter how pitch black the night may get, the dawn luminescence of new possibilities and connections always awaits on the other side, if you're strong enough to endure the pain and find it. Sarah and David seem to have fallen off the face of the planet, understandably radioactive after our public takedown. Though I heard Sarah relocated to Ohio to start fresh and focus on the kids. As for David, he can wallow in the self-inflicted misery of a tarnished reputation and displacement from his own family. My heart does still ache when I remember the good times Sarah and I shared in happier seasons. And I can't help but feel for the devastation unwittingly inflicted on our innocent kids who had their family nucleus shattered. But holding on to hatred and resentment will only ensure that Sarah and David maintain a stranglehold over my soul. I'm letting that baggage go as best as I can. They aren't worth robbing any more life from me. These days, my sole focus is on being a present, loving dad to Emma and Ryan while continuing that long journey of personal healing. And of course, seeing where this wild new connection with Laura may lead. I'm trying to soak up all the good vibes and positive energy wherever I can after such a harrowing emotional gauntlet. There's still plenty of recovering and unpacking this whole fiasco. Don't get me wrong, and Lord knows we're far from perfect as human beings. But with the right fortitude, support system, and self-work, I'm hopeful Laura and I can construct something wholly new and beautiful from the rubble of our former lives. Through trauma and complete devastation, I found unexpected reservoirs of inner strength I never knew existed. So while this path was agonizing to walk, I'm grateful to have navigated it with clarity of truth and purpose. To fight for authentic love and connection again, without the bitter taste of deceit poisoning everything. So that's where I find myself as of today, rebuilding, reconnecting, embracing the unfamiliar and uncertain once again. But this time, I can say with resounding conviction, I'll never abandon my personal integrity and honor like Sarah and David did so callously. The low road is just too dark and lonely a path. As long as I hold tight to the righteous flame lit inside me from this furnace of betrayal, propelling me forward with resolve and wisdom earned, then maybe, just maybe, those ashes can finally be transformed into something resembling lasting beauty and purpose. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, share our story, and I'll see you all again very soon.